Hello everybody, welcome back to The Contrarian. For those of you who are new to this channel, my name is Logan. I really like to talk about the markets and investing, and also investing in such a way that it just outperforms the market in the long term, which fundamentally means you will at times need to take very unpopular stances. And one of these kind of unpopular stances I've taken recently has been short-term bearishness on the EV industry, particularly with just the valuations being placed on most of the companies you see out there that surround this industry. I do, however, think that EVs are the way of the future, but I still do think that that future is likely farther off than most people realize. So today I'm just going to go into the reasons why I believe that EVs are the way of the future, but also why I believe that that future is a bit farther off than most people realize. And this is coming from the standpoint of my background, which is actually civil engineering. I don't think I have really mentioned that yet. If I have, it's been very brief, but I do bring some knowledge to the table in terms of engineering. Obviously, civil engineers are more focused on large scale projects, roads, bridges, etc. So a mechanical engineer would definitely have a lot more knowledge that he could potentially bring to the table with regards to EVs and just the advantages or disadvantages they could have. But I do bring an engineering background nonetheless to the table. So first of all, I will lay out the cases as to why I believe that they are the way of the future. And the first and foremost reason has to do with what has occurred in the mindset of consumers in roughly the last, anywhere to 5 to 10 years regarding EVs. If you were to go back 10 years ago and you were to ask people, if they wanted to ever buy an electric car, they would bottom line say, absolutely not. Those things look ugly. They're terrible. They have, absolutely no functionality whatsoever. They look like miniature golf carts, and they have a range of, 20 or 50 miles or whatever they were back then. So bottom line is they have been popularized recently. Most notably, this has been by Tesla. I do have to give Elon Musk credit where it's due. He has really forced the automotive industry to have to chase after him, essentially, in terms of launching all these EV programs that are now in virtually every major automaker out there. And they're basically all having to catch up with Tesla at this point. So bottom line is the just consumer's mindset has been changed recently, and that is very helpful for electric vehicles in terms of the potential mass adoption of them in the future. The second reason has to do with the engineering and the metrics behind electric vehicles versus internal combustion engine vehicles. And obviously, electric vehicles can have better performance than internal combustion engines. Now, the important caveat there is that they can have that. Now, a lot of them right now arguably don't have better performance or better longevity than internal combustion engine vehicles. A lot of this just has to do with the kind of new technology that's everywhere in these vehicles. It is entirely new platform, so it will take a lot of time for this to eventually reach the point of them being predominantly better than internal combustion engine vehicles. Obviously, right now you have General Motors having to recall a lot of their Bolt electric vehicles, as well as recalls with Tesla and Volkswagen, and virtually every EV maker has had to recall their vehicles at some point. So, but this will eventually get to the point where the acceleration, the longevity, the performance of these vehicles is better than internal combustion engine vehicles. And this also leads into my third point of why they will become the way of the future. Is it just has to do with the economics eventually becoming on par, if not better, than internal combustion engine vehicles. Right now, it's definitely not there yet for everyday people. I kind of like, in my mind, I like to think about, once EVs reach the point of where they are what the Model T was to the, horse and buggy, then all of a sudden you have the potential for them to really just take over the market. Right now, they're definitely not at that point. They're in terms of economics, it just doesn't make sense for most everyday people to purchase an electric vehicle. They're just very expensive. The insurance on them is very high. Charging can be very difficult in terms of just losing a charge on the battery in the winter. So it's also somewhat sensitive to climate in that case. but that will eventually work itself out. I do think that by and large these issues will eventually work themselves out, and electric vehicles will be able to compete on a level playing field. Obviously right now they're being supported by a lot of subsidies out there. I do think that that's not something that I really want to look at as an investor. I don't want to kind of assume that those subsidies will always be there. But I do think that even without those subsidies, that the technology, especially with regards to batteries, will eventually get to the point where they can compete with each other. Now, I have two reasons as to why I think this future of electric vehicles becoming mainstream is much farther off than most of the people who are bullish electric vehicles and electric vehicle companies and stocks right now think. And the first reason has to do with battery technology. This is predominantly the area where the most innovation needs to occur, just with regards to both the chemistry of the batteries and many other areas of just battery functionality as well. So in regards to chemistry, a lot of the batteries right now use rare earth metals such as lithium, cobalt, manganese, etc. These are obviously very expensive metals, and if electric vehicles and electric vehicle companies continue to expand production, the cost of these materials is only going to go up, which means that it's somewhat limited in terms of how far this technology can go, at least right now. So with regards to batteries, just the chemistry and the manufacturing of these batteries does need to improve just for electric vehicles to become mainstream. I guess I do differ from a lot of the most bullish people out there. I don't think that any of this kind of graphene or lithium air technology or whatever is being pointed to out there. I don't think that that is quite at the mass scale of production capability yet. Obviously, when and if that does reach that point of where, say, graphene supercapacitors would actually be the term for them, where they can be mass produced, that would be somewhat of a breakthrough technology for electric vehicles. But until something like that happens, I would just be somewhat skeptical as to how far these companies can really expand production without naturally limiting themselves just due to the nature of these materials they're having to use in their batteries. The second reason as to why I think this future is further off than most people realize just has to do with the enormous overvaluation that can be seen in these companies right now, whether it be the battery manufacturers, the mining companies behind manganese or lithium or whatever, or it's the electric vehicle companies themselves. Obviously, Tesla is probably the largest example of this, but also any of these newer startups that have come about, Lucid or any of these SPACs that have been formed. I just do think that in the near future, I do think that these valuations will crumble, and I do think that that will take a lot of the sort of enthusiasm and mania surrounding EVs. That will take that down significantly. So that will inevitably set the electric vehicle industry back. They won't be able to essentially receive all of the very cheap money that they have been receiving up until now. So that is fundamentally why I do think that EVs are not quite there yet in terms of a mainstream adoption. I just do think that when this bubble does collapse that is surrounding them, most notably, but also a lot of other areas as well, but especially with regards to the EV bubble, when that does collapse, when the valuations do crumble, I think a lot of these companies will probably have to restructure, and it will definitely set them back good ways. But I do nevertheless think that EVs are the way of the future, but it will probably take a lot longer for them to become mainstream than the majority of other people realize. So all that being said, I just wanted to make this video to somewhat clarify my past statements on Tesla, or the EV bubble as I've called it. I just wanted to clarify some statements out there. I'm not necessarily bearish on the technology. I'm bearish the current valuations being put on these companies. So all that being said, if you guys liked this video, just consider subscribing to this channel. Consider hitting the thumbs up button. It lets YouTube know that you liked seeing this content, and I hope to see you again.